It's been a day since my first entry, and a lot has happened in that time. I did not expect things to have escalated to the situation I am now in, but here we are. It all happened so fast. Before I recount all the events of the past couple days, I wanted to thank those who provided advice to me. Sadly, I didn't receive any sort of comfort from people having experienced such an animal before, although now I'm beginning to believe my experience is one of a kind. I saw someone suggest I call the police, and while that may be perfectly reasonable where you're from, it's more of an arduous task in my area. Like I mentioned in my first entry, I live beyond nowhere, and that was a choice my wife and I made a long time ago for our own betterment at that point. An unfortunate sacrifice for basically living off the grid is emergency services are much further from you. This proved to be a significant hardship during the last few months of my wife's life, and an outrageously expensive one at that. Regardless of the great lengths and costs of getting law enforcement out here, I'll also add that I have no idea what they can do for me at this point. Where I left off in the last entry, I didn't have anything concrete enough to warrant calling anyone out here. Now, as I write this, I'm in a much more dire predicament, and I do not want anyone else to be put in harm's way just for me. Yesterday, around early afternoon, I hopped in my truck with the intention of going to see if my distant neighbors knew anything of those strange sounds I was hearing. They were a younger and larger family from what I'd seen over the years. 3 or 4 kids varying from kindergarten age to whatever age they decide to start coloring their hair. None of them were close to senior prom, I'd say. The father was an odd concoction of businessman and moonshiner, perfectly straight teeth and freshly cut hair contrasting with his aggressively camouflaged get-ups. The mother looked a similar sort of way, but even more of a parody of the outdoor trope. Think 2 models from New York doing a country music video. We'd briefly exchanged some meaningless words in the past, with my wife doing most of the talking. As my truck bumped and struggled up the narrow inclining dirt road, I thought of what I might tell them. "Hey guys, how's it been up here? Heard any of the monstrous noises coming from the woods lately?" I was puzzled on how to deliver the true intentions of my spontaneous visit. I didn't want to scare them or come off as a demented creep. The dirt road we both live on is a miserable excuse for a road, more like a glorified hiking trail. It's wide enough for a standard truck, but anything bigger would get tangled in the stubborn growth. I could have sworn it used to be a tad more spacious, though. This forest has always had designs on reclaiming our one connection to the rest of the world, but driving on it at this point it seemed to have the upper hand. It was hard to imagine my neighbors' bulky designer trucks driving down this overgrown path. Have they left home any time recently? The thought darted through my mind and I ignored it quickly. The rocky ride up to their property was all too short, and I still didn't feel prepared as I passed their mailbox and slowly continued up their steep driveway. Their long and winding driveway offered a little relief, as they had a much more cared-for gravel job done when they built their home. My truck appreciated the steadier terrain, but I was lost in my anxieties all the same. As I rounded one bend after the next, I worried more and more that they'd hear me coming and think I was something nefarious. People out in the sticks love their guns and can often view their property as a sovereign nation of sorts. I can't pass much judgment. I'll sometimes reach for my Mossberg upon hearing the occasional mail truck before realizing. I just prayed to myself they wouldn't be looking for target practice. I rounded one final bend before I could see the roof of their lodge-style mansion. I slowed my vehicle's speed down to a crawl, in hopes it conveyed a friendly intention. As I approached and saw more details of the house, I quickly slammed on the brakes. Something was covering much of their house. I couldn't quite make it out or make sense of it. With great hesitance, I rolled up closer. Things never started making sense, sadly. Eventually, I parked my car right next to theirs, and I still didn't understand. I got out and looked at their great big house, which was nearly entirely wrapped up in some giant sort of web. The webbing was so thick that I couldn't even see the parts of the house which were within its confines. The wrapping was so strong it had caused damage, cracking and warping the home's corners. I didn't understand. Something automatic within me willed me to step out of the truck. As I walked around the scene, I discovered new findings. The left side of their lifted black truck was smashed in as if it had been T-boned. The driver's door was open but hanging from its hinges as if something ripped out the driver. I now saw traces of dried blood everywhere. As my eyes grew more accustomed, the more blood I picked up on. All over the interior of the total truck were splatters of blood. The truck windows that weren't shattered were covered in it. The gravel driveway was a canvas for more. All over the place were long drag marks and coagulated puddles. Even on the sections of the gravel that appeared untouched, if I bent over and observed closer, I could see uncountable amounts of little droplets and dots of blood. I couldn't believe it. These poor people were brutalized by that noisy thing out there and I'd been none the wiser. I had no idea how long ago this had happened, but it looked like it had all happened very fast when it did. There were absolutely no remains of any kind and I looked relentlessly for anything to help me understand. I walked around the house to see if there was anywhere the horrible webbing had left an opening large enough for me to get in, but I found no such error. I found another one of their cars though, a similarly lifted and bulky SUV that was also matte black. I tried the handle and the door opened right up. I looked inside and couldn't find much besides what looked to be a hunting map of the general region. I had seen it before, something a bait and tackle shop about 15 miles off sold at the register. Our little hauler had just made the cut in the bottom right of the map. I figured a map of the area would be a good asset I didn't have, so I stuffed it in my pocket with my shaking hands. Beyond the map, there was not much left there that I could see would be of use. I think it's accurate to say I was in some mild form of shock and bewilderment, and wasn't in the soundest of mind. Maybe that contributed to what I did next. As I tried to walk calmly back to my truck, I had the thought that someone might still be stuck inside that house. What if some of the kids were still alive in there? I approached the mess of web and cleared my throat, calling out with my pitiful hoarse voice. I couldn't remember the last time I'd used it. It took a few tries, but after one of my calls, I heard a faint scream coming from inside. Someone shouted. "Hello? Is someone out there?" I heard what sounded to be the voice of a young girl, maybe 14 or 15, inside. "Yes. It's your neighbor," I yelped back. "Are you alright?" "Oh my God, thank God," the girl cried back. "What happened here?" I tried to position myself in a way where I could hear her better. I think she did the same. Something. I don't know what, it was huge and it just came out of the woods and attacked us, the girl was sobbing through every sentence. I think it killed my dad and my mom, maybe my sister and brother too. I was inside when it happened. My God, I'm so sorry. I searched for anything else to say. I came up here on a hunch because I've been hearing the damn thing the last few nights. I'm so sorry. I don't know what it is, I just want to get the fuck out of here already. It's been days or maybe even a week. Please call someone. This stuff it wrapped the house in, it's fucked everything up, all the power's out in here. I've got some grass shears in my truck, I can cut you out and we'll get out of here, okay? I was struggling to breathe. This poor girl had been through so much and all the while I'd been sitting out on my damn deck listening in. Please, just get me out of here, please. I'm so fucking scared, the girl blurted out. Alright, I'm gonna get you out. Don't you worry. I'll be right back, okay? I wobbled to my truck and sifted through all my useless junk until I finally felt the handle of my rusty grass shears. I pulled them out and rushed back to the wall of webbing. I'm back. Where's a good place to cut? I can hardly see through this stuff, I asked urgently. I waited some time and then heard a thumping sound a few feet to my right. This is a door right here, she said as she continued to bang on the door that was invisible to me. I took a long look at the web as I aimed my shears. Every strand was like a thick rope wider than my arm. Cutting this would be no easy task. I opened up the shears and struggled as they bit down on the sticky rope. I grunted and strained, undoubtedly injuring myself. Finally, I cut through one single strand. Upon the severing, I heard a long and deep rumble reverberate around the house and through the forest until it faded into the sound I was more familiar with after listening so closely the last 3 nights. The long plucking rumble. I had a feeling this webbing might have extended into the nest of the unknown thing, but I hoped it was the supposed nest it fled from the night prior and not its new home. I looked down at my shears and they were an unusable mess of sticky web-like tar. I couldn't even open them back up. They were so fused together by this absurdly strong substance. I panicked at the realization that I alone could not cut through this web and I'd have to go get help. I wanted to vomit just at the thought of having to tell this poor girl that information. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, but I'm not gonna be able to cut through all this on my own. It's just too thick, I said helplessly. I began to see water in my eyes. What? No, please don't leave me here. Do you have anything else you can use? Or a phone? Do you have a phone on you? I began to pat my pockets with unnecessary force as if that would materialize the phone I left back at home. I know it's probably ridiculous, maybe irresponsible sounding to younger people, but I never developed the habit of bringing it everywhere I go. For once, I wish I possessed that habit. No. I don't have it on me. But I can go make the call and be back up here in no time. How's that sound? Fuck. Fine. I'm sorry, thank you. I just really want to get out of here. Please hurry, she said with desperation. I'll be right back, okay? You're gonna be okay, I shouted as I moved as fast as I could to my truck. Stupid damn idiot. I don't want to write it, but I have no excuse. I'm the lucky one. I got in my truck and started peeling out. As soon as I got some good speed, I heard the little thunderous taps, except they were not at all little this time. With great volume and moving incredibly fast, I saw the massive thing running towards the house in my rear view mirror. I slammed on the brakes and looked out my window. Within seconds, it went from the woods to the exact location I had cut the single strand of web moments before. Something deep within me awoke, something that must be in all of us that lays dormant. I felt the primal fear of my ancient ancestors run through my veins like an administered drug as I watched this leviathan demolish its own web in seconds only to then move on to the house. It was not impressed by man-made structures. With a few stabs of its sickeningly long legs, it breached my neighbor's house. Smashing into the lodge over and over until finally, the thing had enough room to cram its body inside to feast on that poor girl I had just promised would be set free. I heard her screams. They were the worst thing I've ever heard. The screams of someone being chewed by something that we usually stomp on. It shattered me. The arachnid did not make any guttural noises one might expect from something so monstrously huge. It operated in silence. The only sounds it emitted were consequences of its immense size. I could only bear so much torment before I sped off down the hill. Somehow, it didn't follow me. It must have been satiated enough, or maybe it was looking forward to a future hunt. I don't care to understand its logic. This thing is nightmarish. I'll try to describe what I saw. I understand how silly all of this may sound, but I don't care. Believe me or don't. When it ran to the house, I first saw its extremely long and comparatively skinny front legs in my rear view. Then came the face. I had a side profile view, so not the greatest, but I made out 2 large fangs protruding from a hideous head. The fangs were like 2 swords. I saw that they had some dexterity to them. The fangs could move individually, maybe they were moving with excitement. The remainder of the legs were chunkier and more muscled. There was maybe some hair on them, but it was so disproportionate to normal-sized animals that it was hard to tell if it was hair or some other terrible thing. The front 2 legs that were skinnier seemed to be incredibly sharp and fast. Those legs cut up the web and stabbed through the house. I'm guessing those are the limbs responsible for the hole-punched deer I saw. The body was ugly and beaten up, but in parts it was black and shiny like a widow spider. The overall size is probably not something I could faithfully judge, but it looked to be nearly half the size of my neighbor's house, which stood 3 stories and well over 3,000 square feet. The beast altogether looked primordial, like it had been asleep for millions of years or more. I'm nothing but an old tired man, but that's the only thing that would make sense to me. What I've been describing might fit the description of a spider, and it's definitely something in that vein, but I believe it's much older than the spiders we know. It's something old, and where I live is one of the oldest pieces of land in the world. A land that predates trees. Maybe this ancient land harbored this arachnid until it finally woke up or hatched, I'll never know. All I know is it's here now and it's violent. History must have kept this place a secret for much of time, and somewhere along the way we forgot what was here. Past civilizations would have seen this thing and declared it the devil. Maybe it is the devil, and all the religious texts changed his image to something more familiar, more comfortable. I don't know. What I know as I write this is that I'm all alone. That poor girl was the last one out here alongside me. I now know the second I cut that strand, that girl was dead no matter what. No matter who cut that first strand of web, she'd be dead. But I was the one who did it, and so I blame myself for it. Maybe if I called some brighter minds to come help, they would have instead cut a hole in the relatively untouched roof or found some other way, but they probably would have done the same thing I did. Who the hell would expect a giant spider to come from the woods? I just wanted to help. I'm sitting in my den writing this. It's getting quite late. I don't know what else to do. I'd ask for more advice, but I've lost a lot of my willpower after the whole deal earlier today. I don't know how to fight this thing. I don't know how to call for help. I'm not about to bring this demon more food. I don't even know how to get in my truck and drive away, because I can see 8 eyes shining through the forest like headlights looking right at my house this very moment. Remove your skin, remove your sin, remove the life you sold to them. I found that lyrical little ditty scrawled inside a dusty old tome hidden in a secret passageway in my father's basement. Reading those words confirmed all my suspicions. The man who raised me was a black magician, and he'd fucked around and let something unspeakable loose upon the narrow little streets of our suburban community. Let me back up a second here. You may or may not remember reading about Pastor Noah Winters. 3 years ago on Christmas, Winters fell through the floorboards of his pulpit while delivering his annual Yuletide soliloquy for the congregation at St. Mary's. Built sometime in the 1920s, St. Mary's had seen better days, and the pastor's penchant for pacing while he preached had worn the floor to little more than a hard film that, on this particular day, finally gave out. Hidden below was what the media dubbed a Satan dungeon. That's right, living, breathing proof of a satanic cult that had operated right here in suburban America, sometime in the mid to late 70s. The modern world had all dismissed the 80s and its satanic panic long ago, but maybe there was some fire that came with that smoke, at least here in Woodlands Hills. Think about it. I mean, a popular Lutheran church attended by hundreds of people a week had a satanic altar underneath it. What's more, there were some pretty racy accoutrements found down there, too. Not the least of these was what turned out to be the oldest grimoire known to man. Pastor Winters suffered a broken leg. The Synod, kind of the Archdiocese for Lutherans, approved an emergency renovation of the church, and the book, rumored to be bound in human flesh, went up for auction at the Sotheby's where my father worked. Understand, Dad is an ex-hippie. My sister Sammy and I knew all about his acid days. Still, based on stuff I overheard as a kid, I definitely harbored the suspicion he'd spent some time running in pretty dark circles in the 70s. He'd lived on the West Coast for most of his early life, then relocated to the Midwest in his late 20s. From what I gathered, he and some buddies fled NorCal pretty quickly after getting into trouble messing around in some kind of cult. Yeah, my family's pretty fucked up, right? Anyway, I remember a neighbor telling him the gossip about St. Mary's and the book. I remember it because there was something in his eyes. Something I'd never seen before. The sale took place in October of last year. A month later, Dad lost his job when the auction winner had his purchase appraised and found the genuine article excavated from the cave beneath St. Mary's had been replaced with a crafty facsimile. I knew right away who had that book. By this time, I was in college, usually home 1 or 2 weekends a month. My sister was a senior in high school, super smart, and poised to study in the UK after graduation. When I returned for Christmas break, we headed out to a friend's house for drinks. She told me how, about a week before my arrival, she started seeing a lot of greasy-looking dudes around the house, all of whom Dad introduced as old friends. Our mom had been out of the picture for years, and Sammy often came home and found all these cars in the driveway but no one inside. She was an A student and, apart from the occasional margarita, not a troublemaker at all. Me, though. I knew every hiding place in the house from back when I used to sell drugs to friends, so I knew exactly where all those people parking in our driveway were going. See, there's an old laundry room in the basement. We hadn't used it in years after Dad put a brand new washer/dryer in the mudroom around my 6th birthday. Part of that room's back wall opened into a small closet, barely more than a nook with a couple of shelves. You know, a place for your detergent, dryer sheets and whatnot. As a teenager looking for a place to hide shit, I'd learned the wall of that closet swung inward. Behind it? Stairs leading down. Yeah, it sounds mad, right? Totally true, though. You go down the stairs, and there's this, tunnel. It leads east to the edge of our property, dead ends in a stone doorway that, while I could never get open, a friend and I figured out must open into this big hill in the field behind our neighborhood. The field beyond which stands, you guessed it, St. Mary's. So what do we have so far? A weird snippet of gothy poetry, evidence of a local satanic cult, and a book of spells stolen by my father and his occultist friends. Christmas rolled around, and the weirdest thing happened. Mom came home. Yeah, it was surreal. She literally drove up, parked in her old spot and opened the front door with keys she hadn't used in nearly 10 years. Sammy and I were stunned. I mean, what do you say to the woman who walked out on you? We hadn't heard a peep since she'd left, and then there she was, sitting at the kitchen table with a can of beer and a perpetually burning Pall Mall. It was a lot, and Sammy had a meltdown. I followed her to her boyfriend Cole's house to make sure she was okay. She wasn't, and then I went back, thinking I'd have it out with Mom. Only when I got back, there was no sign of her or Dad. Her half-drunk Molson sat on the table, and the butt from her cigarette lay smoldering in the shapeless ceramic ashtray Sammy had made her for Christmas in 1st grade. Dad never had the heart to throw the thing away, like all Mom's other shit. She was still here, and so was Dad. I took the stairs into the basement as quietly as I could. The old tube TV against the far wall was filled with analog snow, and I could hear Black Sabbath's The Warning playing somewhere far off. I rounded the only corner and saw the laundry room door open a crack, neon blue light spilling out onto the chipped tile floor. I opened the door and saw the hidden passage in the wall yawned wide. The music grew louder. I could hear Tony Iommi's phrasing on the final passage of the song. My brain latched onto it, the only familiar thing in an altogether alien evening. I crossed the threshold into the tunnel, where thick particles from the past floated in the neon darkness. I inched across the world beneath our backyard until I came to that door I couldn't open as a kid. It was open. I knew the moment I crossed the threshold that I was in the Satan altar below the church. This meant that the synod's renovation hadn't touched this underground chamber below St. Mary's, and b, my parents had to have been involved in making or at least using the original altar, which stood before me like the horn of a giant goat. No sign of my parents or anyone else, but 10 feet in front of me, the grimoire lay open on the altar, the crawling blue neon light beaming up from its open pages, coating the walls and ceiling. Across the room, draped atop a pile of jagged 2x4s and shattered stone, I found what looked like skin shed by a couple of giant snakes. One of them had a mustache. Mom and Dad were back together, and whatever they'd started back before we were born seemed to be in motion again. A soiled diary found in an attic. These are the pages from a diary written in the back of a maths workbook. The previous owner had retrieved it from their mother's possessions upon her death, where they entrusted it to me. It is unsure if the mother was the writer of this diary, as no name is mentioned and the cover has long been lost to time. This would become the first in my now extensive archive. May 8, 1991. They left me. Becca, Andrew, and Sarah all fucking left me here. They've left basically everything here, including me, and driven off while I was having a pee in the bushes. I had to go far away because I didn't want them to hear me. I've been sitting here for 6 hours and I'm not sure they're coming back. Just because they turned 16 before me doesn't mean they can treat me like this. It's not even funny. They're supposed to be my friends. What do I do if they don't come back tonight? Camp? On my own? Like building the tent and everything? God, they had better come back. I'm still just in shock that they could do this to me. It's so mean and unfair, and they're supposed to be my friends. Weirdest part is I don't even remember hearing Andrew's noisy car driving off. God, he really needs to get a better car. It's getting late right now, so I have to figure out where I'm going to sleep tonight, because I'm guessing they are going to leave me for the night just to mess with me. June 8, 1991. Last night was awful. I didn't sleep. It was cold, it was wet, I slept on the ground with all the bugs and dirt just because the stupid tent is so complicated. I heard a dreadful scream too, and I know it's probably foxes, but it's still so creepy. Also, how do people in movies just make fire like that? I used all the matches and still couldn't light the pile of sticks I made at all. I found the sparky stick with the metal part, but I don't know what to do with it. I bashed the two together for a solid hour and only got a couple of stray sparks. I'm now currently wearing all the jumpers I caught with me underneath my coat. I ate some of the jerky and crisps we had, but I'm going to need to get into the canned food, and I don't even know how to open it, so that will be a problem when I come to it. I don't need to worry about things that aren't affecting me for now. When the hell are they going to pick me up? This is so mean of them. I don't know how long they think they can keep this going, but Mom knows I left with all of them. I'll be missed if they don't pick me up, and they will be in so much trouble. I'm going to try to make fire again. July 8, 1991. The dear woman visited me last night. She was really nice and helped teach me a few things. I was pretty scared when I saw her, but then she was really nice and her voice was so calm I didn't even notice she was completely naked. When I saw dear woman I realized just how pretty she is, no shampoo, no conditioner, not even a hint of hairspray, and her hair was perfect, like Julia Roberts. She wanted me to call her dear woman. Even when I asked her for her name she just kept saying dear woman, but I think Julie fits her so much better. She was so smart though. She knew all about starting fires, finding berries, and she was so good at showing me how the tent happens. She even taught me how to wash my hair out here in the woods like she does. I'm going to look so good when I'm back. Becca is going to have a fit. The only thing she didn't know much about was how to open the cans. I will probably tackle that problem myself later today. When Julie dear woman left she told me I shouldn't stay in this area because a dangerous cat that's going to be coming through soon. I told her I'm sure my friends will pick me up before that cat can get here. This camping thing isn't so bad when you have a warm fire and a warm tent and warm food. I don't remember having it before dear woman, but I even have a warm knitted blanket now. Ugh, I bet Becca is just laughing at me now with everyone. Becca is such a bitch, joke's on her I guess, because of dear woman I'm actually kinda having a nice time. I'm beginning to appreciate the quiet time out here in the woods, like I'm becoming one with nature itself. Also, I feel bad for writing so many swears in my diary yesterday, but I feel like scribbling them out would only betray the genuine emotions I had at that point in time. August 8, 1991. There is a thick fog all around me. I'm so glad that I got carried away while getting wood for the fire because I don't want to go far from the safety of my camp right now. There has been a sinister chittering coming from the fog and I don't like it at all. For a minute I thought that I heard the rumbling of Andrew's ancient Ford groaning its way through the forest. No one came out of the fog, so I decided to just stay in my tent. I even heard the thumping of Dear Woman's hooves coming close to the tent, but something about it felt wrong. Instead of the comforting glow I felt from her before, I now felt a cold dread. I might have believed it was Dear Woman if she hadn't already told me she was heading as far from here as she could. I'm glad I didn't leave the tent and just hid under my blanket. Earlier, when the weather began to clear, I could have sworn I saw a slender silhouette in the distance. It was sliding its way between trees and heading away from me, so I couldn't get a good look, even though the fog was getting lighter. I didn't think they would get me today. Becca and the others are probably going to make this stretch out until Sunday, when I'm expected at home. I wish they would come back sooner, but I doubt it at this point. I have enough wood until tomorrow and the fog has mostly cleared up. Not sure what to do for the next few hours of daylight. September 8, 1991. Last night I met the chittering creatures. They sort of look like badgers, but all black and walking on their hind legs. Maybe a little more shorter than a badger would be on its hind legs, but I think that's the best description. They were just rummaging around my camp late last night, with a couple of them just enjoying the warmth of the fire. When they noticed me watching, they were skittish until I offered them the last of the jerky. These little things loved the jerky. I think they were still hungry, and unfortunately they were just as confused as I am when presented with a can of beans and no can opener. I think I'll name them chitters, after the noise they make. The chitters have a lot of personality and each one seems to have their own unique quirks. My favorite one being a chitter I've named Munch, because he has a habit of sneaking behind the others to playfully bite their butts before running off immediately. I couldn't stay awake after a while, and seeing the creatures beginning to settle in front of the fire, I decided it was time to go to bed. When I woke up this morning, my new friends had left, but they had left cute stick sculptures strung up around my camp. I think it's pretty, and maybe a thank you from my friends for giving them a nice place to rest and a little snack. They've collected so much firewood as well, so I'm not going to have to worry for the next few days. I'm so lucky to have made such kind friends, even if only briefly. It's evening now and I think I've finally managed to stab into a can of beef stew, but it's hard to eat with all the noise coming from down the hill. I think it's those foxes again, but I might be wrong, because I swear to God for just a second I saw the face of an old woman deep in the forest earlier. Fuck Becca, but I'm too tired to hate her right now. This has been a lot. October 8, 1991. She's dead. Dear Woman is dead. Her head was left just outside the edge of the camp this morning. She was so nice, I can't even believe something would do this to her. Last night I saw something. It must have been when her head was left, but it was too dark to see the head there. It was lit up by the faint light of my fire. I saw a large cat. Its fur was jet black and moved with an otherworldly glide. The worst part is I thought its face was familiar. I don't know how, but I think it was the face of the old woman I saw the other day. This is getting fucked up, but something is telling me to stay put. There is this instinct to not leave the comfort of this nest I've made for myself, so I think for now I won't. I'm going to dig a grave for Dear Woman's head. It'll be a lot of digging considering her antlers, but she's worth the effort. I have enough wood, I have enough food, and I'm sure they will come back to me tomorrow. If not, then I'm sure I will see my mom soon enough, because when I don't turn up tomorrow she is going to be here in a flash. November 8, 1991. The fire is still going, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to abandon it soon. I can hear Andrew's old Ford and Becca's voice out in the distance. I think they've forgotten where they left me, but I'm sure if I just head down the hill where they are I can lead them back to pick all the stuff up and I can get out of here. The fog is really thick again, but I have to at least try. My food supply won't last much longer and I just want to be home.
It was a Friday or a Saturday night. I was pretty gaming with some friends at my apartment before going out to a bar in town. One of my friends called me over, and we were all pretty drunk, laughing and being loud with typical drunken banter. We got to the bar, and no mind that night, surprisingly, at some point in the night I asked for a girl's number who I'd been talking to. I went into my pocket to get my phone and realized I didn't have it on me. I checked all my pockets and confirmed this. I tried retracing my steps in the bar and asked each bartender if someone turned in a phone. I didn't remember even using my phone the whole time I'd been out though. I stepped outside the bar with one of my friends to use his phone to call mine.
Someone picked up on the other end. I heard the fiddling of the phone, but they didn't say anything. I said, "Hi, where'd you find this phone?" Just breathing on the other end. I asked them if they were at the bar, but they hung up on me. I looked at my friend and tried calling again. It went straight to voicemail though.
I tried using Find My iPhone, but apparently I had that feature switched off for some reason. This was a pretty sobering experience. There was no way I could have fun knowing my phone was stolen. My friends told me to just worry about it tomorrow, go to the police station, and get their help in tracking it. I went home early that night. I put a couple slices of bread in the toaster before bed and found my phone on the kitchen counter. It didn't make sense. I signed into it and checked my recent calls, and indeed, someone accepted the call, and it lasted for 25 seconds. Someone had been in my apartment to accept the call, that much was clear. I flipped the place upside down, looking, screaming for whoever it was to come out from where they were hiding. Of course, this had a lot to do with the liquid confidence from drinking so much that night. I finally called the cops, but considering there was no real proof of any forced entry, and places to hide are basically non-existent in this apartment, they couldn't do anything besides a police report. Nothing seemed to be missing from my apartment, but going to sleep that night knowing someone had been in my apartment, or even worse, possibly still been in there with me, is probably the most uncomfortable night of my life. I was 17 years old, and this happened on a late summer night. My dad and little brother had gone to a Boy Scout camp out. My dad was one of the Scoutmasters. I was home alone with my mom for the weekend. She was already in bed at this point. It was about 2 in the morning and I was just finishing up my late night gaming. I had to go to the bathroom one more time before going to sleep though.
While sitting on the toilet playing games on my phone, I heard the faintest little tap on the bathroom door. "Mom, was that you? Mom!" I yelled. It wasn't windy or anything. There didn't seem to be any logical way to dismiss it. Slowly and nervously, I opened the door, but there was nobody there. However, my bedroom door was now shut. I was certain I hadn't shut it. I went over to my mom's room and told her that I thought somebody was in my room. She didn't take me seriously and told me that she didn't know what to tell me. I tried to convince myself that maybe I did shut my door. I opened my door, feeling extremely freaked out, and when I snuck a peek into the room, I felt like my heart exploded inside of my chest. I could see a hand sticking out from behind the dresser in the corner of my room. Somebody was hiding there. I ran to my mom's room and locked the door behind me.
After quietly freaking out, telling her there's a man in the house, she finally believed me and went straight to her phone to call the cops. I put my ear up against the door to try and hear anything going on outside. I eventually heard the man's footsteps come out from my room and slowly come closer to my mom's room until making it right outside the door and stopping. I could see the outlines of his shoes through the bottom crack of the door. He tried the doorknob, but thankfully it had a lock. It seemed a lock was enough to persuade him to give up because I heard him stomp down the stairs and out the front door. I hurried to the window to see which way the man was heading, but he was already gone. When I was younger, 10 years old at the time, my mom had just started letting me stay home alone. We had been watching my mom's friend's dog while they were on vacation. My mom worked weeknights, so she told me that they would come around back since the dog's cage was right next to the back door, and that I would have to let them in. I sat in the den by the back door with the dog by my side while I watched TV. He then started to growl and bark while looking out the window to the dark.
I tried to see what he was barking at, but it was too dark, of course. I assumed it was my mom's friend coming to pick up the dog. I went over to the door with the dog following me and turned on the patio light. I couldn't see anyone out there at first, but the dog was still barking. I made sure to peek at every corner of the yard, but then I saw someone at the garden by our shed. It looked like my mom's friend. They seemed to be bending over, picking something up. I assumed she was admiring my mom's garden or something logical. I then received a disturbing phone call. I prioritized answering the phone as my mom was strict about me always answering the phone when I was home alone. I left the dog to continue barking by the door as I picked up the phone, hoping it was my mom. And it was. She told me that her friend wasn't going to pick up the dog that night as they wouldn't be getting home until past midnight.
They began to stutter as the pure horror prohibited me from speaking coherently. I managed to finally blurt out that someone was in our yard. My mom started screaming like a lunatic. She told me to get up to my room, lock the door, and hide under the bed while my mom called the cops. I obeyed and laid there in silence for a good 10 minutes until I got a knock at the door. I sprang up and out of the room, making it halfway down the stairs. I saw a face looking in through the window of our front door. This face, a guy staring right at me, the face so unsettling that it disturbs me thinking of it today. I screamed at the guy that the police were on their way, but he didn't move. He insisted on just staring at me like a statue. I ran all the way back upstairs, tripping twice, and back to my room. I waited another few minutes before another knock came at the door, followed by muffled shouting noise. It was the police this time. They scanned the whole premises, but the guy was gone. They took me into custody until my mom arrived at the station. After that incident, she started having a babysitter watch me again all the way until I was 12. A long time ago, my girlfriend and I were looking for a private place to be alone together since our parents were always home. There was a vacant house on the corner of our block that hadn't been owned for years. The back door was always left unlocked. I would know because my friends and I had been in there before. We went in through the back, but before we could even get upstairs, there was a knock at the front door. We looked at each other with worry. What if someone had caught us sneaking in? She peeked out the window, but there was no one on the stoop. She made sure that the door was locked before turning back to me. I assured her it was just some kids playing ding-dong ditch. We made it only halfway up the stairs before the frantic knocking on the door came back. She checked the window again. The porch was still empty. She opened the door this time. I still couldn't see anyone. I wanted to look tough to impress her, so I stepped outside and yelled at the pranksters to try it again. I shut the door and waited behind it, hands on the doorknob, ready to throw the door open. I just waited there for at least a minute. I was about to just forget about it when I heard the blood-curdling scream of my girlfriend. I turned to see what she was screaming at, and I screamed as well. Just barely in the dark, we could see the silhouette of a huge humanoid figure very slowly making its way down the stairs. It was moving in a hovering-like motion. We ran past it, just in arm's reach, and left the house the way we came. We ran all the way back to my house, both of us out of breath. We know it couldn't have been an old person. It had to be at least 7 feet tall. Nobody was supposed to be living in that house, though. I even asked a friend living across the street from the house, and he said it had been vacant for years. The ghostly way the figure moved made it all the more disturbing. We both agreed to keep quiet about this story. I still occasionally have a nightmare or bad thoughts about that night.
It started with an innocent creaking of the floor in an old house, but as the nights went by, strange sounds became more frequent. The residents initially dismissed these noises as the house settling, or perhaps the wind playing tricks. However, the sounds grew louder and more distinct, making it impossible to ignore. The creaks turned into whispers, and the whispers into something more sinister. Here are 5 paranormal phenomena that have occurred there and still haunt its residents to this day. These events have left an indelible mark on those who experienced them, turning skeptics into believers and leaving everyone with a sense of unease that lingers long after they've left the house. Unexplained footsteps. At night, heavy footsteps were heard approaching the door. These footsteps were so clear and deliberate that they sounded as if someone was walking with purpose, yet when the door was opened, no one was there. The footsteps would start at one end of the hallway and slowly make their way to the door, stopping just outside. When they opened it, no one was there. The absence of any visible presence made the experience even more chilling. It was as if the house itself was playing a cruel game, teasing the residents with the possibility of an intruder, only to reveal nothing but emptiness. However, the sounds appeared regularly, getting louder and louder. Each night, the footsteps seemed to grow bolder, as if whatever was making them was gaining confidence. The residents could no longer dismiss the sounds as mere figments of their imagination. A mirror that shows something different. Every day, reflections appeared that did not belong to any family member. The mirror, an old antique piece, seemed to have a life of its own. It would show fleeting images of people who were not in the room, their faces twisted in expressions of fear or anger. Sometimes it was just a look in the eyes. eyes that seemed to follow you, watching your every move. These eyes were not just reflections, they felt like they had a presence, a consciousness that was aware of the observer, and other times, an entire figure that had no business being there. These figures would appear suddenly, standing behind the person looking into the mirror, only to vanish when they turned around. The figures were often dressed in old-fashioned clothing, adding to the eerie atmosphere, hiding objects. Every day, things disappeared. It started with small items like keys and pens, but soon larger objects began to vanish. The residents would place something down, only to find it missing moments later. Keys, books, even cups from the kitchen. These items would reappear in the most unusual places, often in rooms that had been locked or in spots that had already been searched multiple times. And when they tried to find them, they were found in places they had not been before, as if someone had moved them, but no one had reported it. It was as if the house had a mischievous spirit that enjoyed playing tricks on its inhabitants. Strange sounds from the attic. Neighbors reported strange scratching sounds coming from the attic, even when no one was in it. These sounds were not just random noises, they were rhythmic and deliberate, as if something was trying to communicate or escape. And the scariest part was that they weren't animal sounds, but rather something scratching to get out. The scratches would often be accompanied by faint whispers, adding to the sense of dread that filled the house. Locked doors that opened by themselves. The scariest thing happened when the doors, which were always carefully locked, started to open by themselves, as if someone inside was opening and closing them without a word. These doors would creak open slowly, revealing dark, empty rooms that seemed to hold their own secrets. To this day, it's unclear what happened in that house, but one thing is for sure. The experiences left a lasting impact on everyone who lived there. The house, with its dark history and unexplained phenomena, remains a place of mystery and fear. Those who decided to stay were never the same. They spoke of sleepless nights, haunted by the memories of what they had seen and heard. The house had a way of getting It started with an innocent creaking of the floor in an old house, but as the nights went by,